within the damp rubber forests of southern Thailand, there once stood a village that no longer appears on any map. Elders in nearby towns whisper that it vanished after an ancient curse, a charm that brought wealth and prosperity, paid for with the souls of innocent children. Those who enter Ban Tham after sunset hear breathing rising from beneath the earth. And once a promise to the darkness is broken, the price demanded never truly ends. This is the story of the curse that devoured the village. Chapter 1. The village that no longer appears on maps. Ban Tham village lay hidden beyond rows of rubber trees in the deep south of Thailand, where the morning fog settled low over the earth like coils of incense smoke offered to unseen spirits. At dawn, the air smelled of damp soil, latex sap, and something older, a faint sweetness of decay that clung to the throat. Older men in nearby towns spoke its name only in lowered voices. Maps printed after 1998 no longer showed it. Government records listed the area as abandoned land. Yet the road to Ban Tham still existed. Niran had not set foot on that road for 20 years. He stood in the back of a rattling cargo truck, watching the paved highway dissolve into cracked asphalt, then gravel, then a thin strip of red dirt cutting into the trees. The driver, a thin man with nicotine-stained fingers, refused to meet his eyes when they reached the fork in the road. "This is as far as I go," the man muttered. Niran climbed down, boots sinking slightly into the damp soil. Cicadas shrilled in the trees with a metallic intensity that made the silence between their cries feel heavier. The driver hesitated before getting back into his truck. "If you value your life," he said, voice barely above a whisper, "do not remain after sunset." The truck engine roared to life and quickly faded into the distance, leaving Niran alone beneath the oppressive canopy. He stood there for a long moment, listening. No dogs barked. No children laughed. No cooking fires crackled. Only the wind moving through the rubber leaves, producing a dry, whispering sound like hushed conversation just beyond understanding. He walked forward. The path narrowed, branches arching overhead like ribs. Tattered strips of faded cloth hung from certain trees, spirit offerings once tied by villagers seeking protection. Many had rotted to threads. Others looked disturbingly new. After 15 minutes, the trees parted. Ban Tham appeared exactly as he remembered, and yet utterly wrong. Wooden houses stood on stilts above packed earth. Clay jars sat beside doorways. A broken cart leaned against a fence overtaken by vines. The village well remained at the center clearing. But nothing moved. Doors hung open as if abandoned mid-breath. Cooking pots lay overturned. A child's sandal rested beside the steps of a house, its pair nowhere in sight. Niran's heartbeat grew louder in his ears. The silence was not empty. It was waiting. A gust of wind drifted through the village, carrying with it a faint odor, damp wood, stagnant water, and something sour, like old offerings left too long at a shrine. He stepped into the clearing. The wooden planks beneath his feet creaked softly, the sound startling in the stillness. His childhood memories surfaced unbidden, running barefoot across this ground, chasing dragonflies, his mother calling him home before dark. Before the disappearances. Before the prosperity. Before the night no one spoke about. A loose shutter somewhere in the village tapped gently against wood. Talk, talk, talk? Niran turned toward the sound. For a brief instant, he felt certain someone had just stepped out of view between two houses. He told himself it was only the wind. But as he moved deeper into Ban Tham, a cold awareness crept along his spine, the unmistakable sensation of being observed from many unseen places at once. He stopped walking. The cicadas had fallen silent. In the heavy air, he could hear only his own breathing. And beneath it, something else. A faint, uneven inhalation, as if the village itself were slowly drawing breath. Chapter 2. The House of Mo. The house stood where it always had, beneath the ancient banyan tree at the far edge of the village, where the roots rose from the earth like the backs of buried serpents. Even as a child, Niran had avoided this place. The elders spoke politely of the woman who lived there, but never after sunset, and never within earshot of the tree. Mo. Some called her healer, others called her medium, a few, when certain no one was listening, called her something far worse. The banyan's canopy spread wide enough to swallow the light. Strips of faded cloth and old prayer threads hung from its branches. Stirring without wind, small spirit houses leaned at its base, filled with offerings long since decayed into dark, sticky residue. Niren stopped several steps from the wooden stairs leading to the house. The air felt cooler here. Not the gentle cool of shade, but a damp chill that clung to his skin and slid beneath his clothes. He climbed the steps. They groaned under his weight. The front door stood slightly ajar. He did not remember it ever being open. "Hello?" he called, his voice sounding strangely muted, as if the air absorbed it before it could travel. No answer. He pushed the door. It opened with a slow wooden sigh. Inside, the smell struck him first: old incense, dried herbs, stagnant oil, and beneath it, the unmistakable odor of something long sealed away. Dust lay thick across every surface. Strings of amulets hung from the ceiling beams, bone fragments, braided cords, animal teeth, tiny cloth bundles bound in red thread. They rotated slowly, though no breeze entered the room. At the far wall stood the altar. Black candles melted into hardened columns. Bronze bowls held clotted residue from offerings. Charred incense sticks overflowed from cracked clay urns. And at the center of the altar sat a clay jar the color of burnt earth. It was wrapped in red thread, knotted tightly, sealed with wax darkened by age. Niren felt an immediate pressure in his chest, as if the air had thickened. He stepped closer despite the instinct telling him to leave. The jar was no larger than a human head. Its surface bore faint symbols etched into the clay, looping scripts and protective yantras distorted by time. Someone had placed fresh ash around its base in a careful circle. Fresh. His mouth went dry. A memory surfaced. His mother once bowing at this altar, whispering prayers for protection when sickness swept through the village. He remembered Mo's hands, thin, steady, always stained with soot and oil. But Mo had died years ago. Hadn't she? A faint sound reached his ears. Niren froze. At first he thought it was the rustle of the hanging charms. Then it came again. Soft. Uneven. A shallow intake of air followed by a slow release. He looked around the empty room. The sound came once more. From the altar. From the jar. His heartbeat hammered painfully in his throat as he leaned closer. His own breath held without realizing it. There was no mistaking it now. Something inside the jar was breathing. The red thread binding it shifted slightly, tightening with a faint creak as if pulled from within. The wax seal trembled. Niren stumbled backward. The hanging amulets began to sway more noticeably, clicking softly against one another like teeth chattering in cold. He told himself it was trapped air, an animal, wind caught inside the clay. But the room had no wind. The breathing continued. Slow. Patient. Alive. Behind him, the door creaked. Niren turned sharply. It remained open, just as he had left it. Yet the light outside had dimmed, as though the shadow of the banyan tree had grown deeper, swallowing the afternoon sun. When he looked back toward the altar, he had the distinct, nauseating sensation that the jar had tilted ever so slightly, as if listening. And in the suffocating stillness of Mo's house, Niren understood with growing dread. Whatever had been sealed inside that vessel was not meant to be found. Still breathing.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 3. The Monk's Warning. The temple stood at the far end of Banyan, where the land dipped toward a narrow stream choked with reeds and dark water. As a child, Niren remembered the place as bright and orderly, saffron robes drying in the sun, the soft murmur of chanting at dawn, the smell of jasmine incense drifting through the courtyard. Now the temple looked as though time had recoiled from it. The outer wall had collapsed in places, its bricks split by creeping roots. Moss spread across the stone steps in slick green sheets. The Naga statues flanking the entrance were cracked, their serpent faces worn smooth by rain and neglect. No prayer flags moved. No bells chimed. Yet as Niren approached, He felt the unmistakable sensation of crossing an unseen boundary, as if the air itself thickened with memory. He removed his shoes at the base of the stairs, an old habit resurfacing without thought. The wooden door stood open. Inside, dim light filtered through broken slats in the walls. Dust motes drifted in slow spirals. The great Buddha statue at the far end remained intact, though soot stains climbed the plaster behind it like smoke that had refused to fade. A single stick of incense smoldered in a bronze bowl. Fresh. Niren's chest tightened. "Wadi," he called softly. The word dissolved into the stillness. Then came the sound of fabric shifting. From behind one of the interior pillars stepped a monk, thin, stooped, wrapped in robes faded almost brown with age. His head was shaved, his skin drawn tight over high cheekbones. But it was his eyes that stopped Niren cold. They were filled not with calm, but with fear. "Luang por Samchai?" Niren whispered. The monk studied him for a long moment before speaking. "You should not have returned." His voice was dry, like leaves rubbed together. "I came to see what happened," Niren said. "The village is empty." Samchai's gaze flicked toward the tree line beyond the broken wall, as if expecting something to be listening. "It is not empty," he said quietly. A chill moved across Niren's shoulders. He hesitated before asking, "The house of Mo, there is ajar." The monk closed his eyes. For several seconds he did not breathe. When he opened them again, the fear had deepened into something heavier, resignation. "You touched it." It was not a question. Niren swallowed. "I only looked." Samchai exhaled slowly, but his hands had begun to tremble within the folds of his robe. "The jar was sealed for a reason," he said. "Some containers do not hold objects, they hold hunger." A breeze passed through the temple, stirring ash in the incense bowl. The hanging bell at the entrance gave a faint metallic tap. Niren turned toward the sound. The bell swayed slightly, yet the air around him remained still. "What is inside it?" he asked. Samchai's voice lowered to a whisper. "A Bua spirit vessel, fed by grief, bound by death, sustained by promises broken." The monk's eyes drifted toward the floorboards, as though seeing something beneath them. The villagers asked Mo for prosperity, protection, fertile fields, healthy livestock, wealth beyond their father's dreams. Niren felt the words pressing against memories he had buried. "They received it," Samchai continued, "but blessings must be balanced." The temple bell tapped again. This time, it did not move. Niren stared at it. A faint echo followed the sound, as if another bell had answered from far underground. "What price did they pay?" he asked, though part of him already knew. Samchai did not respond immediately. Outside, the cicadas began to shriek in sudden, violent unison, then stopped. The silence that followed seemed to press against the walls. Finally, the monk spoke. "They fed it what the earth remembers longest." Niren's throat tightened. "Children." Samchai's eyes closed. The incense ember collapsed into ash. A faint sound drifted through the temple. Not wind, not footsteps. A thin, wavering cry, so distant it might have been imagined, yet unmistakably the voice of a child. Niren turned sharply toward the doorway. "Did you hear that?" Samchai's face had gone pale. "It has begun to wake," he whispered. The bell rang once. Clear. Resonant. Though it did not move. Niren felt the vibration pass through the wooden floor and into his bones. Samchai stepped closer, gripping Niren's wrist with surprising strength. "Listen to me," he said, his voice trembling. "If the vessel has been disturbed, the balance is broken. Hunger will return to claim what was promised." Another faint cry rose from beneath the earth. "Closer now." Samchai released him slowly. "Do not remain in the village after dark," he said. "When the sun falls, the boundary between the living and the owed becomes thin." The light filtering through the broken walls had begun to fade toward dusk. Niren had not realized how much time had passed. As he stepped backward toward the temple entrance, he noticed something that made his skin tighten with cold. The Buddha statue's serene face was streaked with thin trails of moisture, as if it had begun to weep. Behind him, The bell rang again. And beneath its fading resonance, Niran could swear he heard the faint, uneven sound of breathing, rising from the earth below the temple floor. Chapter 4. The First Night. Dusk fell quickly in Banyan, as it always had. One moment the sky above the rubber trees glowed with a dull amber haze, and the next it dimmed into a murky violet, the light draining away as if swallowed by the forest itself. The narrow paths between the houses darkened first, filling with shadow long before the last color left the horizon. Niran returned to his parents' house with a growing unease pressing against his ribs. The structure stood near the center of the village, its wooden stilts still firm, its slanted roof mottled with moss and fallen leaves. The woven bamboo walls had loosened in places, leaving narrow gaps that allowed threads of twilight to slip inside. He hesitated at the threshold. For a moment he almost expected to hear his mother's voice calling him to wash his feet before entering. Instead, only silence waited. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of old wood, dust, and something faintly sour, like cloth left damp too long. The furniture remained where it had always been, the low table. The woven sleeping mats rolled neatly against the wall. The cabinet where his father kept tools and prayer offerings. It looked less like abandonment and more like a life paused mid-breath. He lit an oil lamp. Its flame flickered weakly, casting long, trembling shadows that stretched across the walls like reaching fingers. Outside, the forest shifted. Night insects began their steady metallic chorus. Leaves whispered against one another high above. Somewhere in the distance, water moved slowly through the reeds. Niran forced himself to eat a small portion of dried rice he had brought. Though his stomach resisted, when the lamp burned lower, he lay down on the mat where he had slept as a boy. The wood beneath him creaked as the house settled. He closed his eyes. Sleep came slowly. When it did, it was shallow and restless. He woke without knowing why. The lamp had burned out. Darkness filled the house, complete, suffocating, almost physical. At first he thought the sound he heard belonged to the forest. Then it came again. Footsteps. Soft. Measured. Circling beneath the house. The wooden floor vibrated faintly with each step. Niran held his breath. The steps moved slowly from one side of the house to the other, crunching softly on dry soil, pausing occasionally as if the unseen walker were listening. He sat up, heart pounding so hard he could feel it in his throat. The footsteps stopped directly below him. Silence. Then, scratch. A faint dragging sound traced along the wooden planks beneath his body. Scratch, scratch? Like fingernails testing the grain of the wood. Niran's mouth went dry. He swung his legs over the mat and stood, every movement slow, deliberate, terrified of making sound. The scratching continued. He moved toward the door, lifted the wooden latch, and pushed it open. Cool night air washed over him, carrying the scent of damp earth and rotting leaves. The ground beneath the house lay in shadow, lit only by thin threads of moonlight filtering through the stilts. There was no one there. No movement. No sound. The forest beyond remained still. He exhaled shakily and stepped down the short ladder to the ground. The soil felt cold beneath his bare feet. He circled the house. Nothing. No footprints. No disturbance. He was about to climb back up when he noticed the earth near the front steps. Dark impressions marked the damp soil. Footprints. Small. Too small for an adult. Each print deeply pressed, as if whatever had made them carried great weight. They circled the house. Dozens of times. Niran crouched, staring. The prints ended at the base of the ladder. He looked up slowly. The open doorway above yawned like a dark mouth. From inside the house came a faint sound. Not footsteps. Not scratching. Breathing. Slow. Uneven. As though someone lay on the floor just beyond his sight, drawing shallow, patient breaths in the darkness. A cold tremor passed through his body. Behind him, from somewhere in the village, came the distant creak of wood shifting, followed by another sound, a soft, muffled knock. Then another. Talk. 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 The noises spread, house to house, echoing through the night like hesitant hands tapping from within sealed rooms. Niren stood frozen beneath the ladder, unable to move, unable to look away from the doorway above. The breathing inside the house grew slightly louder. And in the suffocating darkness of Bantham's first night, he understood with creeping dread that he was no longer alone inside his childhood home.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 5. The Woman Who Never Slept. Niren did not remember climbing back into the house. One moment he stood beneath the ladder, staring into the darkness above. The next, he found himself sitting on the wooden floor just inside the doorway, his back pressed against the wall, listening. The breathing had stopped. The night noises beyond the walls slowly returned, insects, the distant rustle of leaves, the creak of wood cooling after the day's heat. Yet the silence inside the house remained heavy, as though something had withdrawn only a few steps out of sight. He did not sleep again. When dawn finally arrived, it came without birdsong. A thin gray light seeped through the cracks in the bamboo walls. Mist lay low across the ground, clinging to the stilts of the houses and drifting through the clearing like smoke reluctant to disperse. Niren stepped outside. The footprints were gone. Not faded. Gone, as if the earth had swallowed them. He walked toward the village well, his muscles aching from tension and sleeplessness. The clearing lay empty, but he felt the same oppressive awareness as the day before, the sense of being watched from windows without eyes. As he reached the well, he saw movement across the open space. A woman sat on the steps of a nearby house. She had not been there before. She sat perfectly upright, hands resting on her knees, staring straight ahead. Her long black hair hung loose and damp against her shoulders, as though she had recently emerged from water. Her skin was pale in the morning haze. Niren approached slowly. "Sawazdi," he said softly. She did not respond. He stopped several steps away. Up close, he could see dark circles beneath her eyes, not the bruised shadows of exhaustion, but deep hollows that made her gaze appear sunken and unnaturally wide. "Are you from this village?" he asked. Her lips parted. "Yes." Her voice was dry, barely more than breath. "I thought no one remained." "I remain." The words carried no emotion. Niren hesitated. "My name is Niren. I grew up here." Her eyes shifted toward him at last. Slowly, as though the movement required effort. "I know who you are," she said. A faint chill moved through him. "What is your name?" "Suda." The name stirred memory. A girl who had lived near the Eastern Grove, who used to laugh too loudly and run faster than the boys. But the woman before him bore no trace of that brightness. "How long have you been alone here?" he asked. "I am not alone." The mist drifted between the houses behind her, thickening in the spaces between stilts. Niren followed her gaze but saw nothing. "You should not stay after dark," she said. He gave a faint, humorless smile. "The monk told me the same thing." At this, her fingers twitched slightly against her knees. "The monk is still alive?" she whispered. "Yes." Her lips trembled. "That means it is not finished." A long silence followed. The mist curled slowly around the steps, brushing against her bare feet. Niren noticed then that the skin around her ankles was mottled and gray, as if she had stood too long in stagnant water. "Do you live here alone?" he asked gently. Suda did not answer. Instead, she lifted one hand and rested it on her abdomen. Only then did Niren notice the shape beneath her thin dress. Her belly protruded, swollen and taut, not with the rounded fullness of healthy pregnancy, but with an uneven distension, as if something inside pressed outward at irregular angles. "You're expecting?" he asked cautiously. Her hand stroked the fabric slowly. "I am waiting." "For when?" Her head tilted slightly. "For my child to return." A faint movement rippled beneath the cloth. Niren's breath caught. The skin shifted again, not the rolling motion of a baby turning, but a slow, crawling pressure moving sideways beneath the surface. His stomach tightened. "How long have you been pregnant?" he asked. Suda's eyes drifted toward the mist. "I was 8 months when they took him." The air seemed to grow colder. "They said it was necessary," she continued, "for the village." for prosperity, for protection. Her fingers dug into the fabric over her belly. They promised he would not suffer. A faint bulge pressed outward beneath her palm, then withdrew. Niren fought the urge to step back. But he never left, she whispered. Her eyes returned to his. Wide. Unblinking. He is still hungry. The mist shifted behind her, and for a brief instant Niren thought he saw small shapes moving within it, low to the ground. Crawling, pausing, listening. He blinked. They were gone. Suda slowly rose to her feet. Her movement was stiff, careful, as though she carried not weight but fragility. I do not sleep, she said. Why? If I sleep, he moves closer. A faint tremor passed through her abdomen. She turned and walked back into the house without another word. Niren stood frozen in the clearing. From somewhere deep within the village came a faint sound. Not wind. Not insects. A thin, wavering cry. And beneath it, a slow, patient breathing, rising from the earth below. Tham. Chapter 6. Those who became prosperous. The morning mist lifted slowly, revealing Tham in a washed-out gray light that made every surface appear drained of life. Niren remained near the well long after Suda disappeared into her house, replaying her words in his mind. They took him. For prosperity. For protection. The memories he had kept buried for 2 decades began to stir like sediment rising from the bottom of dark water. Tham had not always been poor, but it had always been struggling. The rubber trees yielded too little latex. Crops failed when the rains came late or not at all. Livestock died from sickness no one could name. Families survived, but barely. Children left when they were old enough to find work elsewhere. Those who stayed did so out of obligation, not hope. Then everything changed. Niren had been 12 the year fortune arrived. He remembered the first signs. Trees bleeding latex thicker and whiter than anyone had seen before. Tappers returned with buckets overflowing before noon. Rice paddies produced double harvests. Chickens laid eggs daily. Sick cattle recovered overnight. Then came the gold. A farmer digging a new irrigation trench struck a seam of yellow metal no wider than his finger. Within weeks, more fragments were found scattered beneath the soil. Traders from the city arrived with scales and cash. Motorbikes replaced ox carts. Tin roofs replaced thatch. People laughed more loudly, drank more, bought radios, watches, televisions, and they brought offerings to Mo's house. Every family. Every week. At first it was incense and fruit. Then meat. Then envelopes sealed with money. Niren remembered seeing his father bow deeply at Mo's altar, his hands trembling with gratitude. She has given the village protection, his father had whispered. Protection from what? No one said. He walked now along the main path, past houses that still bore the signs of that sudden prosperity, concrete foundations, rusted satellite dishes, faded paint in colors once too expensive to consider. All of it stood silent, rotting, abandoned mid-use. He stopped outside what had once been the wealthiest house in the village. Its carved wooden doors hung open, revealing a tiled floor layered with fallen leaves. A refrigerator lay on its side, door ajar, its interior black with mold. On the wall, a calendar remained turned to August 1998. Niren stared at the date. That had been the year the children began to disappear. At first it was only whispers. A boy who wandered into the forest and never returned. A girl who vanished while walking home from the well. Parents were told the jungle was dangerous. Spirits were restless. Children must not roam alone. Then the disappearances became regular. Predictable. Each loss followed by an unusual stillness in the village, a hush that lasted several days. After which another surge of prosperity arrived, a bumper harvest, a sudden buyer offering double market price, a sick elder recovering inexplicably. No one spoke openly of the pattern, but everyone noticed. Niren remembered the night his friend Lek failed to come home. He remembered Lek's mother wailing until dawn. He remembered the next morning, when Mo's house filled with offerings and incense smoke thick enough to sting the eyes. And he remembered the way the adults avoided meeting one another's gaze. As he stood outside the abandoned house, The air grew strangely still. Even the insects had quieted. A faint metallic taste crept onto his tongue, the same taste he remembered from the days after each disappearance, when the air seemed charged with something unseen. He moved on. Near the edge of the clearing stood the old rubber weighing station. The wooden platform sagged but remained intact. Rusted hooks dangled from beams where heavy buckets once hung. Something had been carved into the wood. Niren stepped closer. Deep gouges marked the surface, scratched repeatedly into the grain. Not letters. Not symbols. Tally marks. Rows and rows of them. He counted without meaning to. One line. Then another. Then another. The marks extended across the entire beam. His stomach tightened as understanding settled slowly into place. They had been keeping count. A breeze stirred the trees at last, carrying with it the faint odor of incense, though none burned nearby. From somewhere beyond the grove came the sound of a child laughing. Niren turned sharply. The grove stood empty. The laughter did not repeat. But in its wake, the metallic taste in his mouth deepened, and a memory surfaced with sudden clarity. The night he left Ban Tham, his mother had packed in silence while his father sat outside, staring into the dark. No one spoke of Lek. No one spoke of the others. Before he climbed onto the truck that would take him away, his father gripped his shoulder with unusual force. "Do not come back," he said. At the time, Niren believed his father feared poverty. Now, standing in the stillness of the ruined village, staring at the tally marks carved into the wood, he understood the truth his father had never spoken. Ban Tham had purchased its prosperity, and the debt had been measured carefully, one child at a time. Behind him, from deep beneath the soil, came a faint vibration, as though something vast shifted in its sleep. And far off, near the banyan tree, a thin thread of black smoke rose briefly into the morning air, before dissolving into nothing.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 7. The Jar That Breathes. By late afternoon, the light over Ban Tham had taken on a dull, metallic hue, as if the sun itself were filtering through tarnished glass. The heat pressed low over the village, trapping the smell of damp soil and decaying leaves close to the ground. Even the wind seemed reluctant to pass between the houses. Niren stood at the edge of the clearing, staring toward the banyan tree. All day he had tried to avoid returning to Mo's house. He walked the abandoned paths, counted the empty doorways, traced memories that felt increasingly unreliable. Yet every path curved back toward the same place, the spreading roots. The shadowed altar, the clay jar wrapped in red thread. And beneath his thoughts, like a pulse he could not ignore, he felt it. A slow, rhythmic presence. Waiting. The banyan tree loomed darker than the rest of the forest, its aerial roots hanging like curtains of twisted rope. The air beneath its canopy felt cooler, damp, and faintly sour, the odor of offerings long rotted into the soil. As he climbed the wooden steps to the house, the boards creaked louder than before, as if announcing his return. The door remained open. Inside, the light was dim and amber, thick with suspended dust. The hanging charms rotated lazily from the ceiling beams. Their soft clicking echoed faintly through the room. The altar stood where he had left it, and at its center, the clay jar. For a moment he thought nothing had changed. Then he saw the ash. The careful circle drawn around the jar had been disturbed. A thin line cut through the gray powder as though something had dragged itself across it. Niren swallowed and stepped closer. The red thread binding the jar had tightened. Several strands were pulled taut enough to dig into the clay surface, as if pressure from within strained against them. The wax seal bore a new fracture. Hairline thin, fresh. He stopped breathing. The air in the room felt thick, resistant, as though each inhalation required effort. Then it came. A faint sound. Slow. Uneven. An intake of air that trembled at the end, followed by a shallow release. Niren's skin prickled. The sound came again. Breathing. From inside the jar. He told himself it was impossible, trapped air shifting with temperature. Some small animal caught within the clay. But the rhythm was wrong. Too measured, too deliberate. Alive. The hanging amulets began to sway more noticeably, tapping against one another with a soft, brittle rhythm. Tick, tick, tick. The air grew colder. Niren crouched slowly, bringing his face level with the jar. The etched yantra patterns along its surface seemed darker than before, as if moisture had seeped into the grooves. Or something else. The breathing deepened. A faint tremor ran through the vessel, barely perceptible, a pulse against the clay, like the movement of lungs drawing shallow breath. His heart hammered in painful bursts. He should leave. Every instinct urged him to step back, to flee the suffocating room, to abandon the village before nightfall. Instead, his hand lifted. He hesitated inches from the jar. The clay surface appeared warm, faintly damp. The red thread twitched. Niren jerked his hand away. The breathing stopped. Silence fell so suddenly it rang in his ears. The amulets ceased their motion. Even the dust seemed to hang motionless in the air. Niren leaned closer despite the cold dread tightening his chest. "Is something inside you?" he whispered, the question escaping before he realized he had spoken. For several seconds, nothing happened. Then, a long, slow inhalation. Stronger than before. The wax seal cracked with a faint, brittle sound. A thin line split across its surface. From the seam at the lid's edge seeped a narrow thread of dark vapor, not smoke. Not mist, but something thicker, as though shadow itself had been liquefied and forced through a gap too small to contain it. It slid downward along the side of the jar, clinging to the clay like oil. The air filled with a stench of rot and stagnant water. Niren stumbled backward, knocking into a hanging charm. The clatter shattered the stillness. At once the vapor withdrew. The crack in the wax seal sealed itself with a faint, wet sound. The breathing stopped. Only the pounding of Niren's heart remained. He backed toward the doorway, unable to turn his back on the altar. The shadow beneath the banyan tree outside had deepened, swallowing the remaining daylight. As he reached the threshold, a soft sound came from behind him. Not breathing, not movement. A whisper. So faint he might have imagined it, yet unmistakably formed. "Hungry?" Niren stepped into the fading light, lungs burning as if he had been holding his breath underwater. Behind him, inside Mo's house, the hanging amulets began to sway once more. Softly. Patiently. And from within the sealed clay jar, the slow, uneven rhythm resumed, as though something inside had settled back into waiting, certain that it would be fed again. Chapter 8. The Price of Prosperity. The air grew heavy as evening approached, pressing against Niren's skin like a warning he could neither see nor escape. The sun hung low behind the rubber trees, its dull orange light filtering through the trunks in long, thin shafts that resembled prison bars laid across the earth. He walked quickly toward the temple. If answers still existed in Banyan, they lived with the old monk. The cicadas had begun their evening chorus, but their rhythm felt strained, erratic, rising sharply, stopping abruptly, resuming in fractured waves. Even the forest seemed unsettled. When Niren reached the temple steps, he found Luangpor Somchai seated on the worn wooden floor near the entrance. The monk did not appear surprised to see him return. "You went back to the house," Somchai said quietly. Niren nodded. "The jar is changing." The monk's eyes closed briefly, as if absorbing a pain he had long expected. "It is waking," he said. Niren sat across from him. The temple interior felt cooler than the outside air, yet the stillness inside carried a pressure that made his chest feel tight. "You said the village asked for prosperity," Niren began, "but what exactly did Mo do?" Somchai remained silent for a long time. Outside, the light dimmed further, turning the doorway into a rectangle of deepening gray. Finally, the monk spoke. "She did not create the hunger," he said. "She gave it a mouth." Niren felt a chill creep along his arms. "In the deep forest," Somchai continued, "there are spirits older than temples and kings. Some wander, some sleep, some wait for grief strong enough to call them." "A ghost?" Niren asked. The monk shook his head slowly. "Not a ghost, a collector." The word lingered in the dim air. Somchai's voice dropped lower. It feeds on unfinished bonds, promises broken between the living and the dead. Love severed before its time. Grief that has nowhere to rest. Such hunger grows powerful when fed by fear and desperation. Niren's throat tightened, and the villagers fed it. They begged Mo for protection from poverty, sickness, loss. She warned them balance must be kept. They insisted. The temple bell gave a faint metallic tremor overhead. No wind stirred. What did she require? Niren whispered. Somchai's hands tightened in his robe. An offering each year, a life not yet rooted in the world. Innocence carries the strongest tether to both realms. The words struck like cold metal. Children, Niren said. Somchai lowered his head. At first, they refused. They said no prosperity was worth such a price. But when the first blessings came, overflowing harvests, healthy livestock, debts erased, their fear softened. When the second year came, and drought struck neighboring villages while Banyan thrived, their resistance weakened. The cicadas fell abruptly silent. The sudden quiet pressed against the temple walls. The third year, Somchai continued. A child disappeared. No one spoke of it openly. Mo sealed the vessel. The prosperity deepened. Niren's breath grew shallow. They told themselves it was coincidence. The monk said. Then another child vanished the following year. And still the blessings continued. Niren stared at the floorboards, remembering the tally marks carved into the rubber station beam. How many? He asked. Somchai did not answer immediately. Outside, the sky darkened toward indigo. Finally, the monk whispered, enough that the village no longer remembered how to live without fear. A faint sound drifted through the temple. A child's cry. Thin. Distant. Niren's head snapped toward the doorway. Do you hear that? He asked. Somchai's face had gone pale. It grows stronger at dusk, he said. The cry came again, closer now, echoing faintly beneath the floor. Niren felt the vibration through the wood beneath his feet. What happens if the offerings stop? He asked. The monk's eyes met his. It collects the debt. The temple bell rang once. Clear. Resonant. Yet it did not move. Niren felt the vibration travel up his spine. The last year, Somchai said, a mother refused. Niren thought immediately of Suda. She hid her child. She fled into the forest. The vessel was not fed. The cry beneath the temple floor sharpened into a thin wail before fading again. That night, Somchai whispered. The ground beneath Banyan began to breathe. A cold tremor moved through Niren's chest. The prosperity ended. Livestock died. Crops blackened. The gold vanished from the soil. Illness spread, and the children already taken did not rest. Niren swallowed hard. And Mo? She sealed the vessel with her own blood and bound the hunger beneath the village. But the debt remained unpaid. The temple darkened as the last light left the doorway. Only the faint ember of incense glowed between them. What happens now? Niren asked. Somchai's voice was barely audible. The seal has been disturbed. The hunger remembers, and what was promised must be returned. From deep beneath the temple came a slow, uneven inhalation, vast and hollow, like breath drawn through caverns of earth. The floor trembled faintly. Outside, somewhere in the village, a wooden door slammed shut. Then another. Then another. The sounds echoed through Banyan like the closing of unseen gates. Somchai's whisper barely reached him. Night has begun. And beneath the temple floor, something old and patient continued to draw breath, preparing to feed.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 9. Crying Beneath the Earth. Night settled over Banyan like a burial cloth. Darkness did not fall gently here, it thickened, pooling between the houses and collecting beneath the stilts like stagnant water. The last trace of twilight vanished behind the rubber trees, and with it went any illusion that the village belonged to the living world. Niren stepped out from the temple into the suffocating dark. The air had changed. It felt heavier, damp and cold, carrying the odor of wet clay, rotting leaves, and something faintly metallic, like old blood diluted in rainwater. Behind him, Luangpor Samchai remained kneeling before the Buddha statue, whispering prayers under his breath. The ember of incense cast a dull red glow across the floorboards, the only sign of warmth left in the temple. "Do not follow the sounds," the monk had told him. But the sounds had already begun. At first they were distant, thin cries drifting through the village like threads of wind slipping between cracks in wood. Then they grew clearer. Children crying. Not loudly. Not hysterically. But weakly, persistently, like voices exhausted from pleading too long. Niran walked toward the center of the village, each step careful, his senses straining against the oppressive silence between the cries. The houses loomed around him as hollow silhouettes, their open doorways blacker than the night itself. The crying seemed to come from everywhere. And nowhere. He stopped near the well. The ground beneath his feet vibrated faintly. A tremor so subtle he might have mistaken it for his own pulse. Then he heard it. A muffled sob. Directly below him. Niran froze. The sound came again, thin, strained, rising through layers of soil as if forced through a narrow throat of earth. He crouched slowly, pressing his palm to the ground. Cold, damp, and trembling. The sobbing intensified, joined by other voices, overlapping whispers of grief and fear, too faint to distinguish words, yet unmistakably human. "No," he breathed. The earth beneath his hand shuddered. Instinct battled reason, but the cries pierced something deeper than fear. He ran back to his parents' house and returned with a rusted hoe leaning beneath the stairs. The crying grew louder as he struck the soil. Each impact sent dull vibrations into his arms. The earth was softer than it should have been, heavy and moist, releasing a foul odor as the blade broke through the surface. Wet clay. Rot. Decay sealed too long beneath ground. He dug faster. The cries sharpened. A thin wail rose, filled with desperation. The blade struck something with a dull, yielding resistance. Niran dropped to his knees, scraping away mud with bare hands. The soil clung thick beneath his fingernails, cold and sticky. Then he saw it. Skin. Gray. Smooth beneath the mud. A small hand emerged from the earth. Its fingers curled weakly. Niran recoiled with a gasp, then forced himself forward again, clearing more soil. A child's arm lay buried to the elbow, impossibly preserved yet pale with death. The fingers twitched. The crying stopped. Silence collapsed inward, thick and suffocating. The hand spasmed once more. Then the earth around it shifted. Mud cracked apart as the small arm pulled upward with a slow, unnatural motion, as though something beneath the ground were pushing it toward the surface. Niran stumbled backward, breath tearing in his throat. The soil bulged. A small face broke through the mud. Its skin was ashen and stretched tight across delicate bones. Its mouth opened wide in a silent scream filled with black earth. Its eye sockets were empty. Yet the head turned toward him. And from its mud-filled throat came a thin, rasping whisper. Cold. The ground around the clearing began to stir. Small cracks spread across the soil like veins. More cries rose from beneath the earth, dozens now, overlapping in exhausted waves of sorrow. Tiny fingers broke through the mud in several places around the well. Hands. Small arms. Fragments of faces pressing upward as if the ground itself were trying to breathe them back into the world. Niran staggered to his feet. The air filled with the stench of wet graves and stagnant water. The mist crept back into the clearing, swirling low and thick, wrapping around the emerging shapes. The first child's head tilted, listening. Others followed. Their hollow faces turned in the same direction. Toward the banyan tree. From beneath its shadow came a faint ribbon of black vapor, curling upward through the darkness like a signal answered at last. The crying faded, replaced by a soft, collective inhalation. The earth exhaled. And in the suffocating night of Banyan, the buried children began to rise, drawn toward the hunger that had waited patiently beneath their bones. Chapter 10. The Child Without Eyes. The mist thickened around the clearing until the world seemed reduced to shadows and breath. Niran stood frozen beside the well, unable to tear his gaze from the small figure pulling itself free from the soil. Mud slid from the child's face in slow rivulets. Its skin was gray and drawn tight, as though time had dried it rather than allowed it to decay. The empty sockets where eyes should have been were dark hollows filled with clotted earth. Yet its head turned with unmistakable awareness. It was looking for something. Or someone. The child's fingers dug into the wet ground, dragging its frail body forward. Its joints bent stiffly, as though memory, not muscle, guided its movement. Around the clearing, more hands broke through the soil. Small wrists. Thin arms. Fragments of shoulders pressing upward. The earth released them reluctantly, as if each movement required permission. Niren stumbled backward, his heel striking the stone rim of the well. The metallic taste in his mouth intensified, thick and bitter at the back of his tongue. The first child lifted its head. Its mouth opened. No sound came. Then its chest jerked sharply inward. A breath. Wet and rattling. The sound tore through Niren's spine. The child inhaled again, deeper this time, as if learning the act of breathing after a long and terrible absence. Then, from its throat, a whisper scraped upward. Return. The voice was thin, broken, and layered, as though many voices struggled to pass through a single ruined throat. Niren shook his head in horror. I didn't take you. The child's head twitched. The hollow sockets fixed in his direction. Return. Behind it, another child's face emerged from the mud, lips peeled back in a silent grimace. One cheek had collapsed inward, revealing dark hollows beneath the skin. Its small fingers clawed at the ground, dragging itself free. A third hand reached up beside the well. Then another. The clearing filled with the soft, sickening sound of wet earth parting. Niren's pulse thundered in his ears. The first child shifted its weight and began crawling toward him. Its limbs moved with stiff, unnatural precision, elbows jerking at sharp angles, knees scraping against stone and mud. The sound of bone grinding faintly beneath dried flesh made his stomach lurch. I didn't take you, he repeated, backing away. I was a child. I left. The child stopped. Its head tilted slowly to one side, as though listening to something he could not hear. The mist swirled between them. Behind the child, the other small forms were turning, not toward Niren, but toward the banyan tree. A faint ribbon of black vapor drifted through the clearing, curling low across the ground like a guiding scent. The first child inhaled sharply. Its hollow chest expanded with a trembling motion. When it spoke again, its voice carried a faint echo, layered whispers rising beneath the rasp. Hungry? The word vibrated through the damp air. From every direction, the other children answered with shallow inhalations, a soft chorus of hollow breathing rising into the night. The first child's mouth opened wider. Mud cracked along its lips. Return what was promised. Niren's back struck the wooden post of a house. He could retreat no further. The children were no longer crawling toward him. They were turning away, drawn by something deeper than memory. One by one, the small figures pivoted, their movements stiff yet purposeful. Hollow faces angled toward the banyan tree's dark silhouette. The mist parted as they moved. Tiny footprints formed in the wet earth behind them. The clearing filled with the faint, synchronized rhythm of fragile limbs dragging across soil. Niren watched in paralyzed horror as the first child paused at the edge of the clearing. Its head turned once more in his direction. Though eyeless, its gaze felt heavy, accusing, ancient. Its jaw worked slowly, as though shaping words it had forgotten. Then, in a voice barely more than breath, it whispered, "Mother." The word dissolved into the night. The child turned away and continued toward the banyan tree. Dozens of small figures followed, emerging from the soil, drawn across the clearing in silent procession. From beneath the tree's roots, the black vapor thickened, coiling upward like smoke from an unseen fire. The air vibrated with a deep, hollow inhalation. The children's breathing answered. And as Niren stood trembling in the suffocating dark, he understood with rising dread. They were not returning to the surface for rescue. They were answering a summons. And whatever waited beneath the banyan tree, was ready to feed.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 11. The Mother Who Called Her Child. The procession moved slowly through the mist, small bodies dragging across the damp earth toward the banyan tree's vast shadow. Niran followed at a distance, his legs unsteady, compelled by dread and a growing certainty that whatever remained of Bantham's fate would unfold beneath those roots. The air grew colder with every step. The smell changed too, the wet rot of disturbed soil giving way to something sweeter and more nauseating, incense long burned into wood, mixed with the sour odor of spoiled offerings and stagnant water. The banyan tree loomed ahead, its hanging roots swaying slightly despite the still air. Beneath it, Mo's house stood in near darkness, the open doorway a hollow black wound against the dim glow of rising mist. The children gathered at the base of the tree. They did not cry. They did not speak. They waited, their hollow faces tilted upward, as if listening for a voice carried through the soil and wood. Niran's breath trembled in his chest. Then he heard another sound behind him. Soft footsteps. Slow. Dragging. He turned. Suda stood at the edge of the clearing. Her hair hung loose around her shoulders, damp with mist. Her nightclothes clung to her thin frame. The fabric darkened at the hem as if she had walked through wet ground. Her eyes were wide, fixed on the small figures gathered beneath the tree. "My child," she whispered. The words barely reached the air. She stepped forward, her movements stiff and careful, as though guided by instinct rather than sight. Niran moved toward her. "Suda, don't." She raised a trembling hand. "They said he would not suffer," she murmured. "They said he would protect the village." Her voice cracked, yet her gaze never left the children. "They took him before he saw the sun." The mist thickened between the hanging roots. The children stirred. One small figure broke from the group and turned toward her. Mud slid from its limbs as it crawled forward, hollow sockets fixed in her direction. Its chest rose and fell with shallow, rattling breaths. Suda dropped to her knees. "My son," she whispered, her voice breaking into fragments. "May is here. May is here." The child stopped inches from her. Its head tilted slowly, as though studying the shape of her voice. Suda reached forward with shaking hands and lifted the small body against her chest. Mud smeared across her arms and clothing, but she did not recoil. She cradled the child with desperate tenderness, rocking gently as if soothing a newborn. "I waited," she whispered. "I did not sleep. I kept waiting." The child's limbs hung limp. Then its fingers twitched. Its hollow face pressed against her shoulder. A faint inhalation rattled through its chest. Suda's breath shuddered into a sob. "I am here," she murmured. "You are not alone." For a moment, the clearing seemed to hold its breath. The other children remained still beneath the banyan tree, their hollow faces turned toward the mother and child. Then Suda stiffened. Her body jerked slightly. Niran saw the movement beneath her clothing, a sudden ripple across her abdomen, as though something inside shifted violently. She gasped. The child in her arms inhaled sharply. A wet, choking sound rose from its throat. Suda's fingers tightened around its back. Her eyes widened in confusion. Then pain. Her abdomen convulsed again, the skin stretching outward in a slow, unnatural bulge that slid beneath the surface like something alive searching for escape. "No," she whispered, her voice breaking. "No, not again." The child's head tilted upward. Its mouth opened wider than its small jaw should allow. From its throat emerged a layered whisper. "Return what was taken." Suda screamed. Her back arched, and the fabric over her stomach strained as something inside pressed outward violently. The shape moved beneath her skin, crawling, shifting, pushing against the barrier of flesh as if guided by desperate instinct. Niran stepped forward, but fear rooted him in place. The mist surged around them, swirling thick and fast. The banyan roots creaked. The air filled with a low, hollow vibration. Suda clutched the child tighter, sobbing uncontrollably. I gave him, she gasped. The child's hollow sockets remained fixed upon her face. "Mother." The word scraped from its throat like broken glass. Suda's body convulsed once more. Then, with a wet, tearing sound, her abdomen collapsed inward as if emptied from within. She fell forward into the mud, still clutching the child. Silence crashed down upon the clearing. The mist slowed. The banyan roots fell still. Niran approached cautiously, his breath shaking. Suda lay unmoving, her arms wrapped protectively around the small body. Her face had softened, the agony erased, replaced by a fragile stillness. The child in her arms no longer breathed. Mud continued to drip slowly from its limbs. Around them, the other children lowered themselves to the earth, waiting, listening. From beneath the banyan tree came a deep, hollow inhalation. The ground trembled, and as the mist thickened once more around the roots, Niran understood with rising dread. The mother had reclaimed her child. But the hunger beneath the village had not been satisfied. Chapter 12. When the charm awakens. The clearing fell into a suffocating stillness after Suda collapsed, her arms locked around the child she had waited for in sleepless grief. Mist drifted slowly across the ground, pooling among the banyan roots like pale water, softening the outlines of everything it touched. Niran stood frozen, unable to look away. The other children had lowered themselves to the earth, their fragile forms motionless in the mud. They did not return to the soil. They did not cry. They lay in a ring beneath the banyan tree, hollow faces angled upward, as if listening to something rising from far below. The night air vibrated. A low, hollow resonance trembled through the ground, not sound alone, but pressure, a deep vibration that settled into bone and marrow. From within Mo's house came a dull crack. Niran's head snapped toward the doorway. Another crack followed. Dry, brittle, like old clay splitting under strain. The children inhaled in unison. A soft chorus of hollow breathing rippled through the clearing. Inside the house, something shifted. A third crack split the air. Then silence. The mist thickened at the threshold, swirling inward, drawn as if by a slow and irresistible pull. Niran moved without realizing he had decided to move. His legs carried him toward the doorway, each step heavy, reluctant, as though the ground resisted his leaving the open air. The temperature dropped sharply as he crossed the threshold. The smell struck him immediately, rot, stale incense, and something wet and metallic that coated the back of his throat. The hanging amulets trembled overhead. Not swaying, trembling. The altar stood in shadow. And at its center, the clay jar. The wax seal had split open. A jagged fissure ran across its surface, wide enough to reveal darkness beneath. The red thread binding the vessel had loosened. Several strands hung slack, as though cut by an unseen blade. A faint black vapor seeped from the opening. It did not rise. It poured, sliding over the clay surface like ink spilled in water, gathering at the base before creeping across the altar in slow, deliberate tendrils. Niran's lungs tightened. The vapor moved with intention. It spread outward in thin branching streams, tracing the etched yantra patterns carved into the altar wood, filling each groove like veins being infused with shadow. Behind him, the children inhaled again. Long, shallow, hungry. The vapor thickened. It pooled on the floor and began creeping toward the doorway. Toward the banyan tree. Toward the waiting ring of small bodies. The jar trembled. A deep vibration pulsed from within it, not the shallow breathing he had heard before, but something larger now, fuller, as though the vessel could no longer contain what it held. A faint whisper emerged from the crack. Layered voices, overlapping in broken fragments. Hungry? Unfinished? Return. Niran staggered backward, but the sound followed, filling the air, slipping beneath thought and into instinct. Outside, the banyan roots began to sway. Though no wind blew, the children's chests rose in shallow synchronization. The vapor reached the threshold and spilled into the clearing, curling around the small forms like a returning tide. The ground shuddered. The whispering grew louder. Not separate voices now, but a chorus merging into a single hollow tone that seemed to come from the soil itself. Niran's gaze locked onto the jar. The crack widened. Clay flaked away in tiny fragments. tapping softly against the altar like brittle teeth. From within the opening, something darker than shadow pressed upward, not a shape, not a body, but density, a thick absence of light that distorted the air around it. The hanging charms began to clatter. Faster. Sharper. Bone against bone. Metal striking metal. Outside, the children opened their mouths. No sound emerged. Yet the air filled with the sensation of a scream too deep to be heard. The vapor flowed around them, seeping into their open mouths, their hollow sockets, their broken lips. Their chests rose sharply. The ground inhaled. The banyan roots creaked as if straining under immense weight. Inside the house, the jar gave a final, splintering crack. The whisper became a voice. Low. Vast. Ancient. I remember. The words did not travel through air. They resonated through wood, soil, bone, and breath. Niran fell to his knees as pressure filled his skull, as if the earth itself were pressing inward from all directions. Outside, the children's bodies jerked with sudden motion. Their fingers dug into the mud. Their hollow faces tilted upward toward the spreading vapor. The hunger had awakened. And in the suffocating dark beneath the banyan tree, the charm that once bound it no longer held.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 13. The Night of Reckoning. The words I remember did not fade. They lingered in the soil, in the wood, in the hollow spaces inside Niran's chest, vibrating through his ribs as if his own bones had become instruments for something vast and ancient. Outside Mo's house, the mist churned violently around the banyan tree. The black vapor continued to pour from the cracked jar behind him, flowing across the ground like a slow, inevitable tide returning to its source. The children rose. Not with the stiff, uncertain movements of corpses struggling against gravity, but with sudden, purposeful motion. Their small hands pressed into the mud, their fragile bodies lifted, hollow faces tilted upward as if receiving instruction from a voice too deep for human hearing. Their breathing deepened. Around them, the earth trembled. Niran forced himself to stand, bracing against the altar as the vibration intensified. He staggered toward the doorway, compelled by a terror he could not resist witnessing. The clearing had changed. The mist now moved in spiraling currents, converging beneath the banyan tree. The hanging roots twisted slowly, as though drawn downward by a force rising from below. The children formed a wide ring around the trunk, perfectly spaced, perfectly still. Their mouths opened in silent unison. The ground answered. A deep, hollow inhalation surged upward through the soil, swelling the earth between the roots. Mud cracked. Fine lines spread outward like fractures in brittle bone. Then the first shape emerged. Not a child. An arm. Gray, bloated, and swollen with decay. It clawed its way upward through the soil. Fingernails torn and blackened, the wrist twisted at an unnatural angle before pulling free of the earth. Another hand burst through the mud nearby. Then another. The soil erupted in scattered points across the clearing. Adults. Dozens of them. Bodies long buried beneath Banyan clawed toward the surface, dragged upward by a force that allowed no resistance. Their skin hung in loose folds. Their clothing clung in rotted strips. Some faces were intact enough to reveal slack jaws frozen in silent screams. Others were little more than dark hollows where features had collapsed. Niran's stomach convulsed. The villagers. Men and women he had known as a child. Neighbors. Friends. They rose with jerking, broken movements, heads snapping toward the ring of children as if summoned before judgment. From deep beneath the banyan tree came a low resonance, not sound, but pressure, like the shifting of immense stone far below the surface of the world. The children inhaled sharply. The corpses froze mid-motion. Then, one by one, the dead were pulled forward. Their feet dragged through mud that seemed to clutch them, guiding them toward the ring. Their arms hung limp, yet their bodies advanced with mechanical inevitability. A bloated corpse collapsed to its knees before the nearest child. The child tilted its hollow face downward. The air tightened. A wet tearing sound split the silence. The corpse convulsed violently as its chest caved inward, ribs collapsing as if crushed by invisible hands. Its mouth stretched wide in a silent scream as something unseen was drawn from within, not flesh, not blood, but a dark vapor that poured upward like smoke forced from a dying fire. The child inhaled. The vapor vanished into its open mouth. Its chest expanded. A faint gray tone returned to its skin. Another corpse fell. Another hollow inhalation. Another extraction. Across the clearing, the dead were forced to kneel before the children, their bodies collapsing inward as the black essence was drawn from them. The sounds filled the night. Wet cracking bone. Air forced from ruined lungs. Mud sucking at collapsing flesh. Niren pressed his hand against his mouth to stifle a cry. The ring of children remained silent, their breathing steady, rhythmic, patient, feeding. Above them, the banyan roots strained downward as if trying to return to the depths below. The black vapor from the jar thickened, feeding the spiral above the clearing. Within its dark current, faint shapes twisted, faces forming and dissolving in endless succession. Then the ground shook violently. The feeding stopped. The children lifted their heads in unison. The remaining corpses froze mid-collapse. From beneath the banyan tree came a deep, cavernous exhalation, vast enough to seem as though the earth itself had released a breath held for centuries. The spiral of vapor tightened. The roots split the soil with a cracking sound like snapping timber. And from the darkness beneath them, something immense shifted. Not emerging, not rising, but turning. The children inhaled sharply. The clearing fell silent. Even the mist seemed to pause in mid-motion. Then, from below, a voice formed, not spoken, but felt within the marrow of every living and dead thing present. Dead remains. Niren's heart slammed painfully against his ribs. The children did not move. The corpses did not fall. The banyan roots groaned under invisible strain. And in the suffocating stillness of Ban Tham's reckoning night, it became clear. The dead had paid. But the hunger beneath the village was not yet satisfied. Chapter 14. The binding that would not burn. The words dead remains pressed into Niren's skull like iron driven into wood. The clearing had fallen into a silence so complete that even breath felt intrusive. The ring of children stood motionless beneath the banyan tree, their hollow faces lifted toward the swirling column of black vapor above them. Around the ring, the drained corpses lay collapsed in the mud, emptied husks sinking slowly back into the soil. The hunger had fed. Yet it was not finished. The earth trembled again, not violently, but with a slow, grinding vibration that suggested immense weight shifting somewhere deep below. The banyan roots groaned as though pulled taut by opposing forces, one drawing downward into the unseen depths, the other holding fast to the surface world. Niren's gaze moved to Mo's house. The jar. Sanchai's words returned to him with crushing clarity. If the vessel is broken, the balance is lost. If the hunger wakes, what was promised must be returned. He turned and ran. The mist clung to his legs like grasping hands as he pushed through the doorway. Inside, the air had thickened to the point of suffocation. The hanging charms rattled violently now, bone fragments clacking together in sharp bursts. The altar stood veiled in black vapor. The clay jar had split further, a jagged seam running from lid to base. Dark fluid seeped from the fracture, dripping onto the wood below with soft, sticky taps. The whispering inside the room had deepened into layered murmurs, fragments of voices overlapping in a low, ceaseless current. Hungry? Owed? Unfinished? Niren staggered forward, his head pounding from the pressure filling the air. He grabbed the jar. It was warm. Not with the warmth of fire, but with a living heat. Like skin fevered with sickness. The red threads binding it had loosened completely. He tore them away. They fell to the floor like dead insects. The vapor thickened instantly, curling up his arms, slipping beneath his sleeves, cold and oily against his skin. His lungs burned. Behind him, the children inhaled in unison. The pressure in the room surged. Niren carried the jar outside. The clearing roared with unseen force. The spiral of vapor above the banyan tree tightened, pulling inward as if drawn toward the vessel in his hands. Somchai's voice echoed in memory. Fire purifies what flesh cannot. Niran dropped to his knees beside a heap of rotted timber near the tree's base. With shaking hands, he struck a lighter from his pack, a habit carried from years away from the village. A small modern object in a place where older powers ruled. The flame trembled weakly in the damp air. He thrust it into the dry interior of a splintered beam. For a moment, nothing happened. Then a thin line of fire crept along the wood. Smoke rose. The black vapor recoiled slightly, swirling with agitation. The children's breathing grew sharper. The flame strengthened, spreading through brittle fibers, licking upward with thin orange tongues. Heat brushed Niran's face. He lifted the jar. The vessel vibrated violently now, emitting a deep, resonant hum that traveled through his bones. The crack widened, dark vapor spilled from it in thick streams, writhing like living smoke. The ground shuddered. The banyan roots strained. From below came a cavernous inhalation, vast and furious. Niran hurled the jar into the growing fire. It struck the burning wood with a hollow crack. For a single heartbeat, nothing changed. Then the flames turned green. A piercing shriek tore through the clearing, not sound alone, but a force that struck the air like a blade. The mist exploded outward. The children staggered as one, their mouths opening in silent screams. The jar split apart. Black vapor erupted upward in a violent column, twisting against the green fire as though resisting annihilation. Within the smoke, faces formed and dissolved in rapid succession, children, adults, expressions locked in grief, rage, and unspeakable hunger. The flames roared higher. The air filled with the stench of rot and burning incense. The earth convulsed. A deep, furious exhalation surged upward from beneath the banyan tree, strong enough to flatten the surrounding mist. The roots heaved, splitting the soil with explosive cracks. The children fell to their knees. Their chests heaved violently as dark vapor poured from their open mouths. Drawn toward the green flames, thin streams of shadow ripped from their hollow forms, spiraling upward into the fire. Their breathing grew weaker, fainter. The column of smoke thrashed violently as the flames consumed it. The shrieking rose to a pitch beyond hearing, a pressure that crushed inward from all directions. Niran collapsed to the mud, hands clamped over his ears as the ground shook beneath him. Then, abruptly, the flames collapsed inward. The green fire extinguished itself. The clearing fell silent. Ash drifted gently downward where the jar had burned. The spiral of vapor was gone. The banyan roots lay still. The children remained kneeling in the mud, unmoving. For several long seconds, nothing stirred. Then the ground released a slow, hollow exhalation, deeper than any breath before. Relief. Or retreat. Niran lowered his hands slowly. The oppressive weight in the air had lessened. The metallic taste faded from his mouth. Around the clearing, the drained corpses began to sink into the soft earth, their forms dissolving into mud as though the soil reclaimed what it had loaned. The children's bodies sagged. One by one, they collapsed gently forward into the earth. Not dragged. Not forced. Returning. The mist thinned. The night grew quieter. Niran stared at the smoldering ash where the jar had shattered, his chest heaving with exhaustion and disbelief. Behind him, a weak voice spoke. "It is not destroyed." Luangpur Somchai stood at the edge of the clearing, his robes streaked with mud, his face pale with strain. Niran turned. The monk's eyes moved to the ashes, then to the banyan roots. "It is bound again," he said softly, "but hunger does not die. It sleeps." A faint tremor passed through the soil, like the final shudder of something settling deep below. The clearing lay silent. The mist continued to thin. Yet in the quiet aftermath, Niran could not shake the certainty settling into his bones. The binding had held, but only barely. And deep beneath Tham, something ancient had closed its eyes. Not in defeat, but in patient waiting.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.
Chapter 15. The village that vanished. Dawn arrived slowly, as if the world itself hesitated to return to Banyan. A thin gray light seeped through the rubber trees, dissolving the last strands of mist clinging to the ground. The oppressive weight that had smothered the village through the night had lifted, replaced by a fragile stillness that felt unfamiliar, almost peaceful, yet disturbingly hollow. Niran stood beneath the banyan tree, staring at the patch of dark ash where the jar had burned. The earth there was scorched black, its surface cracked into fine lines like parched skin. No vapor rose from it now. No whisper threaded the air. The children were gone. Only faint depressions remained in the soft soil, shallow impressions already softening as if the ground wished to forget they had ever existed. Nearby, the place where Suda had fallen lay empty. Her footprints ended in the mud beside the banyan roots, but there were no signs of where her body had been carried. No drag marks, no disturbance, only stillness. Luangpur Samchai stood a few paces away, leaning heavily on a wooden staff. The old monk looked older than he had the night before, as though the darkness had drained years from his bones. "It has quieted," Niran said, his voice rough from smoke and sleepless terror. "For now," Samchai replied. A breeze moved through the banyan leaves, producing a soft, dry whisper that no longer sounded like hidden voices. Niran looked across the clearing. Morning light revealed the village more clearly than it had since his arrival. The weathered houses, the broken fences, the empty well, the paths threaded between stilts. It looked like an ordinary abandoned village. Nothing more, nothing less. "We should leave," the monk said gently. Niran hesitated. "What will happen to this place?" Samchai's gaze moved slowly across Banyan. "It will be forgotten," he said. "That is how some wounds heal." They walked toward the dirt road at the edge of the village. With each step, Niran felt a strange lightness growing in the air, as if the forest itself exhaled in relief. Birds began to call cautiously from distant branches. Insects resumed their steady rhythms. Life returned carefully, testing the silence. When they reached the tree line, Niran turned for one last look. The banyan tree stood motionless in the morning light. The houses sat in quiet ruin. The clearing lay empty beneath the widening sky. He stepped onto the narrow dirt road and walked with Samchai toward the highway. They did not speak again. By mid-morning, a passing pickup truck found Niran walking alone along the roadside. The driver insisted on taking him to the nearest town. Niran tried to explain about the monk, but when he turned, Samchai was no longer behind him. He assumed the old man had returned to the temple, or perhaps had never left it. At the district office, officials listened politely as he described Banyan. They exchanged puzzled glances and produced a regional map. There was no village marked where he indicated. No temple. No road leading into the rubber forest. Only a stretch of protected land long classified as uninhabited. "You must be mistaken," the clerk said gently. Niran did not argue. 2 days later, unable to silence the pull in his chest, he returned alone with a rented motorbike. He found the highway. He found the fork in the road. But where the red dirt path should have cut into the trees, there was only dense undergrowth and tangled roots. No tire tracks, no sign that a road had ever existed. He pushed through the brush for nearly an hour before stopping. The forest floor lay undisturbed, silent, whole. Banyan was gone. Weeks passed. Niran returned to his apartment in the city, but sleep no longer came easily. On certain nights, when the air grew heavy and rain threatened but did not fall, he woke with the sensation that someone stood just beyond his bedroom door. Listening. Waiting. He told himself it was memory. Trauma. Grief for a place that no longer existed. Yet the dreams persisted. He dreamed of damp soil breathing slowly beneath his feet, of banyan roots twisting downward into endless dark, of children standing in mist, their hollow faces lifted toward him, not in accusation, but in patient recognition. One night, he woke with a violent start, clutching his chest. The room was silent, but he could hear it. A faint, uneven inhalation. He held his breath. The sound came again. Not from the doorway. Not from the window. From within. His hand trembled as he pressed it against his sternum. Beneath his ribs, something shifted, a subtle movement, like air passing through a narrow hollow space. A memory surfaced with chilling clarity. The jar vibrating in his hands. The vapor coiling around his arms. The whisper slipping beneath skin and bone. His reflection in the dark window looked back at him, pale and rigid. For a long moment he did not move. Then, faintly, from somewhere deep inside his chest, a whisper formed, thin as breath against glass. Hungry? Outside, rain finally began to fall. Soft at first, then steady, washing the dust from the streets, soaking the earth, feeding the roots below. And far away, in a place that no longer appeared on any map, beneath soil that remembered every promise ever broken, something ancient shifted in its sleep, waiting patiently for the dead to be counted again. Some say Banyan never truly disappeared. It simply does not wish to be found. On heavy nights of rain, when the soil grows wet and the air turns suffocating, there are those who swear they hear children crying beneath the ground, followed by a slow, patient breath. Because broken promises never rest. They only wait for hunger to awaken once more.
Like and subscribe to Whispering Dark Tales for more chilling ghost stories.